joined in studio by our sex and relationship columnist, Dorothy Black, and today we're going to be talking about relationship red flags. Hello.
Hey.
We have red couches to talk about relationship
red flags. I like it. Big couches, big red flags. Let's go.
So I think when it comes to red flags, we often hear about people ignoring red flags.
Right.
But I think it's important to outline what some of those big major red flags are. So why don't you take it away?
Right. So red flags, and we're not talking about this is now the end of the relationship, even though sometimes I think it might be, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of the relationship. It just means that you need to pay attention. And the first thing that kind of creeps in my experience, and I think that creeps in quite slowly because it's so insidious, is when you stop wanting to share stuff with your partner. Maybe you have a feeling, maybe you're angry about something, maybe you're scared about something, maybe feeling hurt, and you don't tell them. You keep that information to yourself. Why? I don't know. Maybe something happens with somebody else, you keep that information to yourself. So I think the minute you start wanting to keep information from your teammates about how you're feeling, about stuff that's happening, I think that's quite a red flag going up there, because it means that you're shutting down communication and there's a sharing that you don't want to happen. And if it's happening because you're defensive, well, that's a red flag.
If you notice this creeping up, how do you deal with it?
You just, I think it's kind of, it grows. So the minute you feel like there's something you want to withhold, and it's not like you have to share every passing thought in your brain, but if you feel like there's a soft tenderness, a hurt or an anger or something that you want to bring up that you don't, the first time, you just have to bring it up and say it. Okay, you just got to vomit that stuff out, because if you don't do it the first time, you probably won't do it the second time, you probably won't do it the third time or the fourth time, the fifth time. The next minute you're sitting with a snowball and it smashes on your relationship, and then you wonder where it all went wrong. So just the minute it starts, you just open your mouth and say, this felt bad for me. What did you mean by that tone? What did you mean when you said this? There's a guy at the office, it's kind of like weird, we're flirting a bit. Just bring it out. If this is supposed to be your primary partner, treat them like a teammate, let them in on what's going on, and the minute you feel like you don't want to, ask yourself why.
All right, so that's a major red flag, and I can see why. What's something else that's quite common in relationships?
When you check out. So I think this also happens quite slowly when people stop communicating, they stop feeling like they're together, they stop understanding why they're in the relationship, they've stopped being conscious about why they're in the relationship, they check out. They go through the motions. They wake up, they go to work, they come back, they eat dinner, they watch TV, they go to sleep. And I think quite often that doesn't have very much to do with the relationship as much as it has to do with how you feel in the world and what's going on with you, but it is expressing itself in the relationship. So the minute you feel like you're not engaging, you're not communicating, you're just like ticking by the days, you should pay attention, stop, find out what it is you want and why you're just, zombie walking through the relationship. Oh, zombies are actually still doing something. Why are you sleepwalking through the relationship?
All right, so that's the second one. What's our next big relationship red flag?
Another big one is when you don't want to touch your partner anymore. You don't want to have sex with them. You don't want to cuddle with them. You don't want to kiss them. You might as well just be living with your brother or your sister. That's a major red flag. If you started out being affectionate, holding hands, kissing each other, saying sweet things, having sex regularly, wanting to have sex, and that stops for you, you need to be paying attention to why that stopped. And I think that might actually lead into the next one, which will probably come before that, which has to do with contempt. There was a guy called Dr. Gottman who watched a lot of couples, and he said he could tell right at the beginning of their relationship whether they were going to last because of how they treated each other when it came to conflict. Was there contempt? Were they belittling each other? Were they looking down on each other? Were they sniping? Were they bickering? How did they deal with the small vulnerabilities and the issues? And I think when that kind of contempt builds up and the bickering builds up and the rage builds up and you don't, I think that automatically leads to, well, I don't really want to have sex with you. I don't want to touch you. I don't want to say sweet, tender things to you in your ears because I'm still filled with like mad rage about something that happened a year ago that I didn't talk about. So I think those two go quite hand in hand. Not wanting to touch your partner, not wanting to engage physically, and then feeling quite contemptuous, belittling, mean-spirited. Then what are you in the relationship for? What is that about? Why are you there? You know what I mean?
It sounds like the way to deal with most of these is to just communicate with your partner.
Right. And from the beginning, and then also to learn how to communicate properly, because I say all the time, communicate, but we don't all know how to communicate properly. Communicating properly is communicating clearly and with clarity, and taking ownership of your feelings, saying like, this thing feels weird for me. You said something, it made me feel weird. I feel weird about that. Can we talk about it? Not like, you know, you're wrong for saying that sort of thing. You did this thing. What's wrong with you? Now we're defensive. Now we're fighting. We're not talking there. Talking is talking with clarity and with honesty and with vulnerability and listening to what's, and you need to practice that. And that has to happen from the word go.
Now, if you experience one of these red flags, would you recommend getting a third-party mediator?
I think, you know, most clear-minded adults can work this out for themselves. You practice, you read a lot. Google is an amazing resource with 1 million people who have written amazing things about how to deal with conflict or with these kinds of red flags. If you feel like you can't, you're sitting with a partner who's kind of stonewalling you, who's not interested, and there's no forward movement, then by all means, get help. But at least try and start by yourself first, because you can. If two partners want to talk, then they'll talk. If they don't want to talk, then there's a problem. Also, be aware that you might be hearing stuff you don't want to hear. So be prepared for facing a situation that you might not be quite ready for. So should you both get a couples counselor? Those are great. Do you need some help personally? Maybe that's where you need to start.